Okay, we will open city council work session for Wednesday, June 16th. Approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
And basically today's meeting is public comment. Specifically about the food tax option. First, we're going to introduce it again or just dive right in?
I think the direction was that we would do a short presentation for each meeting.
Okay,
So everybody gets the same information. Okay,
You're welcome to start.
okay. This is one of those great presentation situations that I'm ready to go because I'm going to hand it over to Mark. Next slide.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, starting out, but why are we doing anything? And there has been, a process on how this occurred. And it did get started with conversations with the fire district. And Mark is, of course, the expert on that. So Mark, if you want to talk about what the district is facing.
So we started this conversation back in 2019. The budget committee started the conversation of how do we improve the funding of the district to better service the community. And so we did the levy, as everybody knows, last year it passed, but that also was coincided with starting meeting with the city about something to do with a tourism tax and getting money for tourism. And so that's what led to the food and beverage tax. Canada Beach Fire District, just to be clear, and again to dispelling rumors, the fire district is a separate taxing entity from the city. We do not receive tax revenue from the city of Canada Beach. We are a special district and we have our own tax structure. Canada Beach Fire District has one of the lowest or the lowest permanent tax rate for a full function fire district in the state at 35 cents. When we pass the levy, along with the other levy we have, our operating is 89 cents. You looked at the average on the coast, the average is about $1.37. So extremely low. And so that's what this was about, is trying to bridge that gap. And looking at doing other things besides trying to raise property taxes. 77% of our calls are tourism related. It is on somebody that does not have a second home, has nothing to do with the district besides they're here visiting. And so I was trying to bridge that gap of taxpayer responsibility versus tourism responsibility.
Okay, I think, one of the things that really made an impression on me is the 89 cents, when you compare it to the $1.35, that's quite a gap, but it's actually 35 cents versus $1.35.
It is without the levies.
Yes, yeah. So can see why there is that gap. So
the 800,000 was a number that when we looked at what is our revenue at 89 cents a thousand and what would it be at $1.37 a thousand? That gap is about 800,000.
okay. Anything else, Mark?
Nope.
Okay, then looking at this, one of the reasons that food and beverage tax came up is that it's very flexible, and but it's one that only the city can impose. So the district can't do it for itself. So if we have our own emergency management needs, an example is this building. It is construction with hollow block, and the slab is on a base of dirt and sawdust. We have found it's located within the tsunami zone. So from an emergency management standpoint, it's not a very good location. And we had been looking at a debt service of between $700,000 and $800,000 per year for the what had been programmed so far. And the city was not looking at food and beverage to pay for City Hall at that point, until this all came up and we got the numbers from Econo West or Northwest or whatever it was. I thought that the way that this would be funded was be by taxpayers if it was to pass on a levy that the city would hold. So anyway, we're very close in what the debt service would be between $700,000 and $800,000. So the numbers are very close as far as what's required. We didn't go right to a food and beverage tax. We looked at property tax, which, as I said, was what had been anticipated for the City Hall police station. We also looked at TLT, or the tourism lodging tax, parking fees, and food and beverage type tax. Excuse me. Property tax. There are ways that the city and district could solve their problems using a property tax. We would each have to hold what's called a referral or an election to ask the voters to approve the funding for, our projects and needs. The district, however, is limited to a 5-year time frame. So if they pass, as a matter of fact, the one that they have passed already is limited to 5 years, and then they have to go back to the voters again for it to continue. The city's situation is a little different in that if we were to look at it to pay debt service for a building, and the referral, we would be asking, would you approve this amount of money for the life of the loan? So a normal situation might be like 30 years. So that's what would be approved, and that's what would be asked of the voters. So the property tax is a possibility for both, but there's not a scenario where the city can raise our property tax and just hand money to the fire district. What would the tax be in order to go ahead and meet the same amount of money? Tax increase would be 5% for both the district and the city to match the revenue requirements. So at 5%, and that would just be for one of us, it would be 10% for both of us. Your taxes would raise $64 per $100,000 in assessed value. So if your assessed value is $500,000, it'd be 5 times the 64 is what the annual debt service would be. But if both were approved, and each one would have to have a separate referral, if both would be approved, it'd be $128 per 100,000 for that to work. Who would pay? All property owners in Cannon Beach. Tourism lodging tax. Call this simple math. Each 1% increase raises $572,000. However, by state law, we're required to set aside 70% for tourism-related purposes. So $400,000 would come out of that. And so the revenue available for us to do a project using TLT would be $171,000 as far as what would be left. So we would need to raise the tourism lodging tax an additional 4.5% for the city to get the $800,000, because we would only be actually capturing $170,000, and the same to get the $800,000 for the district. So we would be doing a total of 4.5 and 4.5. So we would increase 9%. The current TLT rate for the city's budget is only 8%. So we would have to more than double what the TLT is in order to be able to capture the same funding. Who would pay in this case? People staying in lodging properties. And then everybody's favorite, parking fees. There are 209 public parking places in the downtown area. There are a lot of other parking places in neighborhoods and other things, but the ones that we would be able to effectively manage, and we were using for this comparison, is the 209. I don't have all the figures here, but it would require $32 a day for each space if we were going during the season in order to capture the funds that we're talking about. And that $32 a day would have to be paid by day trippers, business owners, employees, downtown shoppers, permanent residents, and second homeowners. If you take any one of that group out, then you have to raise that $32 in order to go ahead and do the same amount of money. So the $32 is based on everybody pays. if we were to try to develop that plan, we would have to refine it down to, who is actually going to be the bill payer on that. And then we looked at a food and beverage type tax. And the reason I'm saying that is there's different ways to do it. You can do it on food. You could just do it on beverage. There's iterations in there. And we're still having discussions about what that might be. But a food and beverage tax is a charge to the purchaser of prepared foods. It is not a tax on the restaurant or the business. They do collect the funds. They receive 5%. They get to keep 5% for the trouble, if you want to call it that. And that's the same arrangement that we have with the hotels that are collecting the tourism tax. So that's how it would work. And then we worked with the fire department. The fire district started the process, but we did a joint study to determine how much money might be generated by a food and beverage tax. Hired a consultant, and they estimated that for each 1% of a food and beverage tax, the city would receive $431,590. And that's if we did food, beverage, the whole thing. The city staff had done an earlier estimate and estimated that each 1% would generate about $212,000, or roughly half. So we think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. We really don't know yet. Now, on this one, who would pay? Individuals purchasing prepared foods. And then the consultant estimated that 4% of the total revenue would come from locals dining out. 96% would be paid by visitors. We've had some interesting discussions about prepared foods. My favorite example so far is the bagel. If I hand you a bagel, it's not prepared. If I cut it, it is. So there's all kinds of iterations in there. Don't want to get too tied up on that. Now, are there any questions either from staff or the audience or anybody on Zoom?
Do we know how many tourists come through Cannon Beach?
I don't think that we do. We can say based on the number of parking places, which is 210, but there's also parking places every place else. So I don't think there is a possibility. I've heard numbers that have ranged widely. Anybody who's been on the commission for a while know of any studies that were done?
Chamber might be able to give you a reasonable number,
Yeah.
but that's from kind of extrapolating out of all the visits they have to the information center.
Right.
We'd have to do some research on that one.
So residents versus tourists is kind of for medical care and so forth was kind of what I was. Mark, do you have a number on that?
I mean, there's been like same thing as Bruce, there's been a widely between what the hotel's capacity are, what Travel Oregon says. There's, sayings that you can have 10,000 people plus in this town, up to 30,000 at a time on peak weekends. I said, we've been tracking for 3 years our district resident calls or our taxpayer calls versus non. And it keeps going up. In 2020, it was 77%.
One way to look at it is the planning director and I both did a separate study on what's called effective population. And we know that around 1,700 people sleep here at night, but that's not necessarily who's here during the day because like 1,300 employees, come into the town. You've got 1,000 hotel rooms. You've got 760 something second homes and all that. So generally during the day, our population is probably closer to 7,000 to 8,000, but some of those are second homeowners. But a lot of them are hotel and others. We estimate that as our effective population. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be doing your job.
No, that's fine. Okay, if there's no questions, what I'm thinking we'll do is, since most of the folks that are on my Zoom list are already here, we'll just jump into the present audience first, and then I'll call for any hands on the Zoom. Okay? Do I have a volunteer who wants to go first? From the audience.
I'll go first.
Thanks, Bob.
You want me here?
Yeah. Name and mailing address.
Bob Atia. I live in Cannon Beach with my wife. I really didn't want to be here tonight. I've been up since 4 a.m. I had to drive into Portland early this morning. Just got back about an hour ago.
Of course, then.
I hate public speaking and I suck at it, but I'm here because I wanted to defend Cannon Beach's fire chief, our fire chief. I feel that he is trying to do the right thing and be responsible and not kick the can down the road any farther. He's stuck his neck out, and unfortunately, some people are trying to chop it off. But thank you for trying to solve that problem. Our funding is ridiculously low. I'm a 25-year career retired firefighter paramedic from the metro area. I can't believe that you guys are able to do what you're able to do with your funding and your volunteers. I mean, I'm amazed at what you guys do. I did a comparison between Hoodland Fire Department and Cannon Beach Rural Fire District. They cover an area that's about 15 miles long along a busy highway, tourist dependent, lots of small towns, very equivalent to what our fire department does. Their tax rate is 3.5 times what ours is. I don't know how we can continue on our current path. I see bad things ahead happening if we don't increase the funding for the fire department. I have a lot of compassion for small businesses. My father ran a small business for 40 years. My wife ran a small business for 30 years. You're on the edge of catastrophe half the time when you're on a small business. It's not easy. The restaurants have gotten hammered by COVID. They haven't recovered yet. They're not at capacity. They can't find enough employees. I have a lot of compassion for what they're going through. And I don't blame them for freaking out about this, but if we institute the tax maybe next year, they have time to get back on their feet. I've read all the arguments against it from restaurant owners, and I hear their concerns, and some of them are valid. But I haven't heard a single viable alternative option for funding for the fire department or the city, except raising property taxes. If it's put to a vote, restaurant owners are a small single-digit minority in the city. If it's put to a vote, raising property taxes on 1,700 people or a pass-through tax on restaurants, they're going to lose. They're going to lose. And it bothers me to see this become so contentious. It doesn't have to be this contentious. Deb spent a couple hours yesterday calling restaurants in Ashland, and she spent more time in Yachats. Everybody said it's not a big deal. It's been in place for years. The employees are not getting reduced tips. Customers aren't going somewhere else to eat. They aren't complaining. They asked about the tax. They said, we didn't think Oregon had a tax. When they explained to them that it's a city tax, then they're okay with it. It's not an issue. If I was calling the shots, I'd have the food and beverage tax would be as high as the lodging tax. It'd be 8%. And we'd have a parking fees. We'd have paid parking in Cannon Beach. There's no reason we shouldn't have a beautiful new city hall. No reason why we shouldn't have a beautiful new police station. I mean, these are old, dilapidated buildings. And from what I hear, there's black mold in the police station causing respiratory problems with employees. I hope that's not true, but our public employees deserve better than that. We have the money here. We need to tap into it. There's an incredible source of funding here. So, we ask a lot of our volunteers here, and they're volunteers. They're paid for this, but we expect them to go into a house fire. And when you're crawling on your belly in a burning house, you can't see your hand in front of your face, and you feel like you're going to die from the heat. And you think you may not make it out alive, but you're going back there because there's a report of somebody trapped in the back of the house. And that's what you do as a firefighter, whether you're paid or a volunteer. You do CPR on people at 2 a.m. in the morning. You cut bloody, mangled people out of car wrecks. You rappel off a cliff. You go out into the surf to rescue people before they drown. We ask our volunteers to do all of that, and they deserve the best equipment, the most modern equipment, the safest equipment. The restaurant owners, if they're opposing, funding for the fire department, I mean, I hope they don't have a heart attack or have a grease fire in the restaurant, because when they rely on the fire department, they may not be there. They could be busy on another call. So I'm 100% in support of a food and beverage tax, and I think it should be higher than 5%, but that's probably not realistic. But I'd like to end this with a quote by Martin Luther King. It's about courage and cowardice. Courage is an inner resolution to go forward despite obstacles. Cowardice is submissive surrender to circumstances. Courage breeds creativity. Cowardice represses fear and is mastered by it. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when we must take a position that is neither safe nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next. I am so happy to be here and see all of you. I really am. I'm so happy to be. I want to do a little dance. Because I'm so free of a mask. So I'm happy. So thank you. My name is Deb Attia. Hard act to follow. He was always fireman of the year. I don't know how many years.
Not there.
Yeah, every other, it seemed like every other year. He was fireman of the year and I was up there clapping for him. So I clapped for him today. Camaraderie with the fire department is a strong family sense and loyalty is there like you've never seen before. So I am standing for the fire and the police and supporting the food and beverage tax and for Cannon Beach because we should thrive. So I did all this research and you guys get to read it all. I'm not going to repeat all of it, but I will summarize that. What's the big deal? It's the best thing for our city. I mean, nobody's had, Ashland was like totally, there was no negatives in Ashland, none. There was one in Yachats. I called 4 on Yachats and I'll continue on tomorrow if you guys want me to. I love research. So if you guys need research, I will do it for you. And I love talking to people. So I had a good time doing it. So anyway, there was one man who he's about the no taxes, no taxes. It was like there's a mantra of that type of personality. And then he was like excited to go make lots of money. So the rest of the people basically said, it's easy. The POS system is not a big deal. It's just calculations. It's going to cost them to get into it. I support probably that we should help those people like Lazy Susans or a few of those people to support them to get set up with it if that's an issue. I think we need to overcome all objections. So that's my philosophy. So anyway, you can read all of the comments because I dictated them basically word for word as I wrote as they were talking. So I think Bruce covered a lot of what I was going to say. What are the 4 ways to raise the money? And did a great job of that. I love that. And again, Mark said they're about 30,000. We have 1,700 residents who put up with a lot of tourists coming in here and pick up their litter and do all of this kind of stuff. So it doesn't seem right that they would have to pay more property taxes to me. I would like to see Cannon Beach have a mission statement, and then we'll work down from a mission statement with all of these goals. But I think keeping the community safe is our priority, and these people are going to keep us safe. And when nobody worries about it until you really need them. At night, you think you're having a heart attack, or I've seen it because I was a nurse for several years. Or there's a tsunami, or there's an earthquake, or an aortic aneurysm. Whatever it be, I think the tourists would actually donate money for it to know that they could come down here and have good health care. I think it's a priority. I don't think it's negotiable. So, I don't know what the needs are in Cannon Beach. I think Bruce can probably speak to that, but I would say it's fire department, police. If there's black mold in that, I had a reaction to black mold a few years ago and stayed in a hotel and I was so sick, I almost died. I was so sick. So black mold is a bad thing if you read about it. So you'd be opening yourself to a lawsuit if you have employees breathing that. Water upgrades, sewer upgrades, schools, the school donate. There's a lot of people in this town, if they have a little plaque on the wall, might donate to that cause, by the way. Music, dance, art, electric cars will need to be the future. Affordable housing and daycare, I think that's a huge issue that I'm hearing about. Because I'm out talking to all these people, I'm meeting all sorts of people, and this town has amazing people in it. And old Oregonians who've been here a long, long time. And I didn't realize how many there are. So bike pass, HRAP, okay, so the goal is to have a thriving community, keep it community, I'm hearing community village. We got to keep that in mind. I think you mentioned that, Sam. You know, the restaurants, it's going to help them if we have a thriving community like it has Ashland. That was what I heard in Ashland. Our community is thriving. How to raise the dollars. And I want to hear from the restaurants how they think we should raise the dollars. So I want some solution answers on that. I haven't heard solutions. In fact, the guy down here at Yaha says, what's the solution? I don't have any solutions. We got to have a solution, and he couldn't offer one. So the rest of the people said, yeah, there's solutions. We have our restaurant, the best restaurants ever. You know, they have Shakespeare. We could have something like the Shakespearean Festival here at the school or something cool. I mean, we could, if you want to dream like a little bit bigger. So I vote 100% to pass the food and beverage tax and create a thriving community. Support our, you know, I love our fire and our police. So my loyalty is with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. I was afraid you guys were going to start shoving and. Oh, you go first. You go first.
I didn't really prepare anything today, so I'm gonna go kind of freestyle. And after Bob's speech, it's a little hard to follow. Greg Swedenborg, PO Box 1145, Cannon Beach, Oregon. You've been hearing me talk about this for 5-6 years now. And you've probably, if you're reading them all, you've read a lot of my letters on this topic over the years. And I wanted to kind of just take an idea or take time to talk about some of the things, why it's important to me. And why it's important to me, I think Bob kind of hit on it. The fire department, obvious. I mean, my father was on the volunteer fire department in Cannon Beach for 47 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Word black, I don't know.
Yeah.
I grew up in a fire department family. I'm, very supportive of that and would be happy to pay property tax towards that and any emergency services for that matter. Until along comes a figure like 77% of all calls are going to people that don't live here. And it's strapping the force or the department and it's people getting essentially a free ride for coming and playing and recreating. We just happen to live here and pay the taxes to support the services that they use when they fall in the water or get hurt or whatever the case may be. So I'm really hung up on that. I'm hung up on solutions that we talk about year after year, like affordable workforce housing and let's fix transportation issues and let's fix parking and these things that don't get done. And I don't think they don't get done because people aren't passionate about them. I think they don't get done because we don't have money or we start spending money elsewhere. I mean, if Haystack Rock wasn't there, and HRAP didn't exist, the city would have another, $500,000 a year almost, somewhere in that ballpark. If other services, and I'm not taking anything away from HRAP, don't think I'm going there, but there's little towns of 1,800 people that don't spend that kind of money on something in their backyard that they care about that much. They just don't have that kind of money. And this town has been very fortunate that 70% of the budget, you hear that all the time, comes from the collection of people that spend the night here, the transient tourists, and collected by the lodging industry or the property management companies and what have you, hotels. And that's true. But I think when you made a very bold decision to close that industry for 63 days in March for good reason, you learned real fast that this town's kind of a one-trick pony in terms of revenue. And how long, I remember Bruce giving speeches about how many days can we stay afloat with our cash flow if this pandemic goes on, and blah, blah, blah. And that's scary. It's a scary position to be in. So I could go on and on about all the things I've written letters about over the years. I could talk about Ashland and all that, but the other night I heard kind of the same things that I heard in 2019, fall of 2019, when we had this topic about the food and beverage tax, when it was about the water rates and the rates that are going to go up in July in 2 weeks, and the meter changes that went around, and the infrastructure of the water treatment plants that need to have water and sewer and all that. And I've been meaning to ask what percentage of the restrooms in town make up water if that was a customer, but it's a lot, I would imagine. And so that, again, with the day tripper and the people using infrastructure and facilities, not just emergency services, but restrooms, washing their hands, trash, all those things, parking that we talk about. So when I hear the industry saying, no, don't do this with us, obviously COVID is a bad time. It's bad optics. It's terrible time to be doing that. The restaurant industry is still hurting. I have complete empathy for that because for the 63 days my industry was shut down, I'd never had that happen before. And it hurts, and laying people off sucks, and getting PPP loans is not fun. And I have gone through what they're going through. Luckily, my industry kind of bounced back a little faster because it wasn't restricted in the way they were. And they have a very difficult road to hoe to get back to normal. But I have faith, as long as something doesn't go south on the pandemic front, we will get back to normal soon. And they're in the ballpark, in a place where they will get back to normal. If they lived in Maupin, they might not get back to normal as quick, or some other place not situated right on 7 miles of beach. So a couple of things that I heard is COVID bad timing. Acknowledge that 100%. So you'll hear me talk about it in a second, but if you were to enact anything or do anything, take some time, from the restaurant perspective. The POS thing, my first job out of college was programming Micros POS systems. I know a thing about them. I'm a bit of a POS nerd. Micros was bought by Oracle and technology moved along. I don't know everybody's systems here in town, but I know Toast and Clover, Squirrel, Micros, NCR, IBM, programmed them all. And this was back like Windows 95 days. It's not difficult. And if you really think about it, 48 other states in the country have a sales tax on food and beverage. So the POS systems almost come with that as a default. And to, change your item and how you do it, it's not difficult. Now, there are some restaurants that are cash only and have the ticket on a stick kind of thing. Yeah, there's some solutions they'd have to come with, but if they have a long runway, they can do that, and they're not expensive, and some kind of grant program to do that would be more than any other city would do, I would imagine. So there was that. Single industry, we're not singling out an industry. I mean, maybe for this topic, but the lodging industry has been, the numbers there. The building industry, construction, with ever since the workforce housing, I guess that's more of a fee, but still kind of a tax. When you go to build a house, that adds to the cost of whoever's buying your house or your fence or whatever you're fixing. And, that goes towards, so there are a couple others too, the weed shops and alcohol and stuff. I don't know how all that gets into the city, but there are others out there. So it's not solely on, and not just restaurants, it's bakeries, coffee shops, if you do a beverage, which I think you should, service places like Fresh Foods and all kinds of anybody who prepares foods. Staffing, everyone's dealing with that. I don't want to dwell on that. I'm going on too long. But in 2019, when we talked about this with the water, I remember distinctly saying, folks that were presenting last week, slow down. Let's think about this. Let's not do this. Well, we didn't know a pandemic was coming. We've had plenty of time to think about alternative ways to tax people, or to raise funds. And this isn't new. It's come up again and again. We've just punted through a pandemic, and now we are still with the same problems and no solutions. So I don't like when there's not a solution reference. I like to come up with them. Parking, one, not enough scale, like you mentioned, higher overhead for managing. I think the time to implement parking is when you need to pay for a parking solution. Kind of like the Megler Bridge, charge a toll until it fixes itself. and then let it go. We could use a use tax or a tourism tax, you know, so if you've read my letters, you heard this, there's 5 states that don't have sales tax. Delaware, Alaska, New Hampshire, Montana, and Oregon. Every single one of them, except for Delaware, with their crazy corporation laws, has a sales tax on food. New Hampshire, no sales tax, 9% sales tax on food. Alaska, no sales tax, but over 50 some odd cities have self-imposed use taxes, which basically is a sales tax. So Ketchikan is 6.8%, Juneau is 5.5%, Anchorage doesn't do it, Wasilla is 6 point something or other. And those are sales taxes. So if you buy a magazine, a book, food, prepared food, I don't know, a Yuli knife and a beaver pelt, you pay a tax on it. And it's because Montana's the same way. You get West Yellowstone, Big Sky. They're only towns in Montana with 5,500 people or below can charge this use tax, which is a sales tax on that town only. Because when you go to Big Sky and buy ski goggles or your $12 latte, you're paying a tax and they're getting the tourists. And that's what it is. It's just how it works. And Oregon and Delaware are the only two. And Oregon obviously has a couple with long history and some interest in some other cities. So there's no other way to get the day tripper, the tourist, whatever, the pass-through driver in terms of contributing to the revenues of the city to pay for the infrastructure that's used. So solution-wise, you've heard it all before. I'm just throwing this one out there. I don't even know if it's legal. But, you know, enact a tax now, 5%, follow the playbook of Ashland. They've been doing it for almost 30 years. It's been extended and sunsetted, or come up to sunset and then extended by vote 2 or 3 times. And it's going to 2030 now. The Go 5% use their playbook. They've figured out every possible way, the whole bagel thing, or whether it's a donut or a half dozen, they've figured it all out. Mm-hmm. And it wastes time to try to do that, to think we're so unique. And enact it now, because I think there is some fear that another OSR 320 kind of law will come down on food and beverage tax. So all of a sudden, every town like us will have our hands tied if the legislature comes down with something like that. Enact it now, put it out a year, 18 months, whatever, to kick off. If you want to get started on projects, by my calculations, the lodging tax for the county started on January 1st, 2019. So by the end of this year, that'll be about 1.3, 1.4 million. You spent 400,000 on the school. So you have probably roughly $1 million in cash to fix up the school and operate the school. But if you need to use it for a temporary city hall for a while you redo this one or build a new one, I guess if you build a new one, you'd be in here, or put portables there, use that money for a while to do that. And I would call it, Lori's not gonna like this, but I would call it like a inter-office transfer. So they are restricted funds, but as soon as the tax kicks off in 2022 or whenever the date is, it pays that back. And you've now not waited around for 2 years to work on a solution that everyone's kind of wanting to do now or not do. But there is a solution to be had there. Utilize those assets, transfer the funds, or use them for debt services while you do the projects you want to do. So that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Greg.
Greg, when you were talking about to Lori saying, you could go ahead and do this and do this, I was looking and thinking, well, you're lucky she has a mask on, because I've seen that mouth and face when I start talking to her like that. It's easier said than done. It's a snarl. When I get crazy.
Am I on candid camera right now?
Well, maybe, yeah.
Yes, you are.
Oh. Hey, my name's Eric Ostrander, PO Box 97. I don't know if I'm going to have anything additional to say that Bob and Greg haven't already covered. Bob covered a lot of the stuff that I wasn't intending on saying anyways about being a firefighter. I'm a volunteer with the Canyon Beach Fire Department, as well as a hotelier, just Seabreeze Court right on the other side of the block from here. So I don't know if I'm going to have anything additional to say that they haven't already covered. I'll try to skim through what I've prepared. and see if I do. So I'm a hotelier and a volunteer firefighter on Cannon Beach Fire, among many other volunteer positions that I hold here in the city and also elsewhere on different boards that I'm on. There's a lot that attacks like this can do to help the citizens in Cannon Beach. I believe that there's been quite a bit of miscommunication about what this tax is and how the fire department receives funding. Primarily, I've seen confusion on how TLT funds are collected and distributed. The lodging industry in town collects 8% lodging tax for the city of Cannon Beach, 1% for the county, and 1.5% for the state. We have a 12-room hotel just right up the street, and every 3 months we separate out all the sales tax or all of the room sales from retail items and any other exemptions that we have. We calculate and pay the tax to all three entities in the span of approximately an hour, once every quarter. It's a lot. I know it would be a lot more complicated for restaurants. There's a lot more moving parts and a lot of other stuff, but figuring out what your gross sales are is not rocket science. It's what your gross sales are. And everyone in any industry that's selling stuff knows what they're selling and how much they've made. Let's see. One of the misconceptions about the fire department that's already been covered earlier is that the fire department doesn't receive any funding from the general fund from the city. I mostly want to say most of this not for your guys' benefit, but for anyone listening as well, just so it's said from multiple standpoints, because I know you guys have said it 1,000 times, Chief said it 1,000 times, but the department doesn't receive any money from the general fund from the city, and it has no access to the TLT funds, which the city depends upon for the majority of its budget. The fire department receives its total funding from the permanent property tax rate and a couple of levies that we have. The most recent levy was passed and is replacing one of our engines, which is nearing the end of its usable life. And it also funds a position for division chief, who is also our training officer. And he takes a significant burden off of chief and other volunteers in responses. So it's been fantastic having another paid employee there. All of this is to say that while the majority of emergency responses are requested by visitors of Cannon Beach, the entirety of the funding is paid for by residents. As for the conversation about whether this will deter visitors from Cannon Beach and cause them to go to Seaside or down to Manzanita to get dinner instead of eating here in Cannon Beach, I don't have any numbers, facts, or figures about that, but I can tell you if you go to Seaside or Gearhart or Astoria, a burger or a pizza is significantly cheaper than it is here in Cannon Beach, but people still eat in Cannon Beach. The lines are still hours long at many of the places in town because people want to eat in Cannon Beach. People come to Cannon Beach for Cannon Beach. They don't come just because it's cheap or because they're not paying tax. We've at the hotel, we've asked every single guest since the last public comment whether or not a food and beverage tax would affect their decision on whether or not they would come to Cannon Beach. And I haven't had a single guest say it doesn't. These are overnight guests, so they're not day trippers. Definitely a certain subset of the visitors to town. But none of them have said that they would change their impression about whether or not they would come to Cannon Beach. And I followed it up by asking if they would go to Seaside to avoid paying tax. And none of them, they all vehemently stated no. And one of them actually laughed out loud at the concept of going to Seaside just to avoid a 5% tax. To be clear, I'm very sensitive to the struggles of the restaurants. The restaurants have been suffering. I understand that they're suffering on multiple fronts. Labor shortages at historic levels right now. We've always had labor shortages in Cannon Beach, and a lot of that has to do with our housing situation here in Cannon Beach, but it's just people don't like to stay year round for some reason in Cannon Beach. The winter, I guess, just isn't great for them. But historic labor shortage, constantly changing COVID regulations and the rising cost of goods. I think that an addition of a food and beverage tax would do little, if anything, to affect any of these three aspects that are concerning. And I do have a suggestion to add to the labor shortage conversation with that is instead of using the funds for a new renovations to the city hall, new city hall up on the hill out of the inundation zone, out of the city, all that stuff, use it to fund affordable housing in town, affordable workforce housing that's specifically for people living within town that have W-2s of businesses in town, from businesses in town. One last topic that I'd like to address that I continue to hear is the conversation of equity, that to institute this on restaurants when they're currently struggling while every other business in town gets off scot-free totally overlooks the taxes that have been paid by lodging guests for the past 30 plus years. This is an overstatement. The lodging industry has been shouldering the responsibility of funding the majority of the city for years. And as those of us that work in the lodging industry are well aware, hotel guests don't make the city full. The day trippers make the city full. When the lodging was shut down, the city was still pretty close to full of people. The public parking was full. Every town was still full of people, but there was nobody in any of the lodging parking lots because there was no overnight guests staying here. The day trippers do contribute. They do not at this time contribute to the upkeep and maintenance of any of the tourist facilities as of now. The bathrooms, the water and sewer infrastructure that has to be built to the levels to handle the amount of usage that it receives, or the emergency services. I am all in all, I am in favor of adding a food and beverage tax to help fund the fire department. But I would like to see this tax that's being discussed separated into the two separate components. The 2% tax that the chief has proposed to fund the fire department, and then a separate 3% tax to fund the city facilities that are being discussed, with them being separated and explicitly lined out as to how they're two separate taxes. I don't fully understand why they've been grouped completely together as they're two different conversations, the city needs and the emergency needs for the city. But they have been discussed together. And I really don't want to create a division between lodging and the restaurants, or the city and the restaurants, or any one of the restaurants, I don't want to create any kind of division. For years, the town has existed together. We're all in hospitality. Pretty much every business in town is a hospitality business. We're providing services either for the visitors or providing for visitors and residents. And I think that all of us can work together to continue to make Cannon Beach as strong and as safe as it has been in the past, and safer, hopefully, than it's ever been in the past by passing a tax like this. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Okay, that's the room. Rusty, pull up the attendees and we'll see.
So Hannah should be on Zoom. She'd like to speak.
Hannah? Okay. Hello, Hannah.
Good evening. How are you all today?
Good, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, councilors, mayor, city officials, and all for carefully considering the implications of implementing this revenue source. First, a little history. My family, the Quarles, have been on the north coast of Oregon for over 80 years. And in that time, we've owned and operated restaurants, stores, and a hotel. And throughout our history, we always valued our community and felt proud in being a part of it. My great-grandparents and great aunt and uncle were very active in the Seaside Elks community, hospital, and other organizations. My grandparents, who some of you may have known, Marge and John Sandstead, contributed to the Cannon Beach Conference Center, churches, fire department, American Legion, and many more. Eric and I carry on that tradition by volunteering and contributing to the Chamber, Fire Department, and various other organizations. It's my belief that in a small town, it takes a village to run that village, and that's what this tax helps to rectify. Hoteliers and guests have been doing much of the heavy lifting. We collect taxes, and then quarterly we distribute those taxes to the government organizations, which use them for marketing, city operations, HRAB, building a new jail in Astoria, and more. And over 80% of the city's budget comes from lodging taxes. Our computer system that we just got in December, before that we were using pencil and paper, is called ResNexus, and many of the hotels in town use that same program. It easily tells me how much tax was collected and which agency to pay that amount to. And I don't see how any computer program that itemizes receipts wouldn't easily be programmed to do the same thing. I'm sure you can go into many of our restaurants and the computer system could accurately tell you how many bowls of clam chowder were sold that day. And I don't want to oversimplify this because it will require some startup costs to disseminate which taxes, disseminate which items the taxes apply to. But after that point, it shouldn't be that $15,000 that some of the restaurants are mentioning to organize taxes 4 times a year. If the Driftwood is able to divvy out the cat tax that they charge forward to their customers, then this 5% tax isn't any different. Which in the case of the cat tax, the tax is on the business. And in the case of the food and beverage tax, the business is not paying the tax, the customer is. The restaurateurs and the hoteliers just happen to be the middleman in those tax situations. In the past few weeks of this conversation, like Eric mentioned, I've asked many of my guests if a tax like this would cause them to change their mind where they would vacation, and none would. And Eric stole my line exactly from this. They come to Cannon Beach for Cannon Beach. They don't come here to avoid taxes. Additionally, I've spoken with some restaurant workers about this tax, and there seems to be a lot of misinformation that's being spread around. Some workers are even signing petitions and are not even clear what the tax is or what the petition is that they're signing. And one of the things that really frustrates me about this situation is that it's up to the management on how to sell this sort of thing. I hope that when this passes, instead of going to the staff angry about it, the restaurateurs will empower them that they are helping the community, that this tax that they're collecting is contributing to life-saving services from our fire department. So when they get into a car crash or pulled out by a riptide or break their leg on the beach, we have people who can go out there and help. That's what this tax is helping to do. It's also really frustrating to me as I sit in these meetings and read the comments being tossed around that the general consensus is not supportive of a new city hall. It's too expensive, it's too big, but the plans that I've seen place the city hall and police department separate from the community. And I'm selfish that the current city hall and police department are only a few steps away. So when I need to go to a meeting, I can, but I can still be within arm's reach of my business. But I implore the city council and city hall to listen to what's being said, because there's some really good creative ideas coming out that wouldn't need a multi-million-dollar budget. Repairs to the police department, mold remediation, work for home for some. It's what's being done around the world permanently for many now. And when it comes to an EOC, an Emergency Operations Center, I hear that the public works yard over by the RV resort would make a great location for that. So what would I rather see this tax go towards? The fire department, of course, but also things that would benefit residents and tourists, like improvements to our public bathrooms, mitigating the cost of the water resiliency program so our water bills don't go up every single year, and create housing opportunities for the community, including grant options for the Cannon Beach workforce to buy housing, because it just kills me to see all of these incredible houses we have in Cannon Beach turn into vacation rentals. And it starts the cycle again of lots of jobs, but no one to work them. And anyone who is opposed to this tax, I hope you'll take a good look at all of the things that day trippers' dollars can help do to improve our community. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to hearing more about how this tax goes.
Thank you, Hannah. Rusty? Anybody else on the Zoom call is welcome to raise their little hand. I don't see anybody. Oh, Kathy. There we go. Kathy?
Good evening. Thank you, City Council and other various people. It's hard to see who all's in the room from the distance. Thank you for this opportunity. And I just want to say that I personally support this tax, and also want to say that, you know, I'm always in favor of charging for parking, because I think it's a motivator to get people out of driving their cars around in circles. And that won't solve the issues that are that have been presented. The revenue stream that could be created by a prepared food and beverage tax is there's no comparing any of the other revenue streams for it. And as a property owner in Cannon Beach, it is a burden to pay the property taxes to support the tourism industry and try and keep reasonable rents and maintain the property. And so I very much appreciate the conversation about a prepared food and beverage tax, because I think that that is a revenue stream that will support the fire department and will support the city and gives flexibility for future projects down the road, which has not really been mentioned, which is something that Ashland has done. You know, you have one project and you tackle it and you get the funding and you are able to complete that project. And then once that's done, the city is able to relook at what they're going to target their funding towards in the future, if say 3 to 5 years down the road, and then you can take care of some future projects while maintaining the same prepared food and beverage tax, so that you're creating a sustainable source of income and being able to tackle improvements and sustainability without putting the burden on property owners. So from the property owner perspective, not from the business owner perspective, I think this is a great idea.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
What's Kathy's last name?
Please say.
And spell that? Kathy, will you spell your last name, please?
Sure. KLE, C as in Charlie, Z as in zebra, EK. And my mailing address is P.O. Box 602, Cannon Beach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else on the attendee list? The rest goes through all these little, there we go. Okay, last chance. Thank you all. This has been enlightening. We will be offering.
Sam,
Pardon?
can I add a little more?
Sure.
I want to add a comment. One of the things was said last time we were here. One of the things that was said was, and I've heard many times, always have, government needs to live within their means. I totally agree with that. I've said that many times myself. However, in this instance, as the fire is concerned, a couple of restaurants talked about how their costs have gone up so extremely. Their cost of food has gone up, et cetera. How do they combat that? They raise the prices. Fire district, my costs have gone up astronomically the last year. Our calls are up almost 40%. My medical budget is 242%. So far over budget in medical expenses. How does a fire district raise their costs? This is how. I don't have the ability to charge more. We don't charge. Okay, we're not a transporting agency. I can't charge more to run the hospital. Our technical rescues are up. We've done more technical rescues the last year, rope, surf, trail, than we ever have. We've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on technical rescue equipment. I have yet to ever rescue a citizen. In the 4 years I've been here, I've never once gone technical rescue that is somebody that lives in the fire district. But that is probably one of the most expensive and dangerous things we do is technical rescue, is surf and rope. So I just want to put that out there, food for thought, when we talk about living within our means. It's getting impossible to live within because our costs are going up.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Again, unless the council has anything they want to add, what I was going to say was that we have another meeting Saturday at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
For listening to anybody else who can't make this hour or the previous time slot we had. We will be scheduling probably another one somewhere down the road. I would like to see a lot more faces and a lot more names lining up just to hear. But I also know this is a difficult time of year for a lot of folks, just getting into our busy season. But at that, I also want to mention, this is kind of, I will not be at the Saturday meeting, but I will zoom in afterwards and listen to what people say. We have that capability through YouTube that Rusty has set up for us. Mike will also not be here because he's got a trip that he has to make. So I need a volunteer to lead the meeting. You're okay with it, Brandon?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so Brandon will be leading the meeting. And with that, any last comments? Anything for good of the order, anything new and different?
Coffee with the counselors.
Oh, coffee with council.
Oh, that's right. We do have coffee with the counselors on Monday at 10 a.m. And anybody who wants to talk about the food and beverage tax or anything else, please Zoom on in. And can we do some limited attendance as well?
Yes.
Okay, so you can either Zoom or attend the coffee with the counselors, 10 a.m. Monday.
I'd like to add something.
Please.
Yeah, I haven't prepared anything. However, I keep thinking about the emergency management that we have to be prepared to take care of all of our visitors, all of our citizens. And the fire department is very visible. I mean, that's what they do. But in an emergency, we also have the police department right there side by side with them. Often we're there first, often helping to direct the traffic, keep the situation under control. And in the case of an emergency like an earthquake, tsunami, major fire, this entire city staff becomes the emergency service provider. The counting is an important part of the recovery, the resilience. The city staff, public works, everybody in the city, all the staff is a part of the recovery and the support during any emergency. And I don't want you to lose, don't want you to lose sight of that. They're not visible. They don't drive big red trucks with sirens, which I think would be a lot of fun, but they are very important to providing the services for these tourists as well as the citizens. They maintain the parking lots. They keep the shrubbery cut down. They provide assistance. Our public works people in particular are like the city's ambassadors, helping people all the time. After any kind of emergency, your own house, when the pipes break, try to get a plumber. You can get a public works person out there to shut it off, take care of it. If we have a significant shake, the big shake, this entire building will collapse. There's no doubt in my mind. This building is already, walk down the hall, it's like this. It's a wavy floor. I'm serious, walk through there. It's open to anybody who wants to do that. The police department, if they had this much room, they'd be happy. They're shoulder to shoulder, little dividers between them, and it's dark and it smells, okay? We need to do something. And you cannot fix that wall that's hollow brick and have it withstand any kind of an earthquake at all. We have the roof will collapse. And what do we do then? Everybody's going to say, well, why didn't the city do something? Well, what we're trying to do is to do something to make sure we have the ability to provide the emergency services and the ongoing public services for this community and visitors. So please don't just focus on the fire department. It's very important. Police department's important. City staff is important. They all contribute to the health and welfare of this community. So anyway, that's my speech.
I support that.
I agree.
Unanimous.
If I could just throw one thing in that I've always said, is that when we talk about an EOC, an emergency response, fire is one of what we call the ESS, or the emergency service functions. Police is another, and there are 10 other ones. And so what happens if there was to be an earthquake or something is that fire would be doing rescue, police would be doing public safety, and then the city hall employees will be doing everything else, contacting the state, contacting, all those things, bringing in contractors to fix things, coordinating the rescue efforts. We're gonna have the list of where all the damages are and where the injured are, all that information will reside with us if we have a place from which to work. So it's the Emergency Operations Center is separate from police and fire. They may have one person in the room. Everybody else will be a general employee.
Brandon?
I just wanted to ask, if you mentioned that we may have another meeting, and since Mike and yourself won't be here this Saturday, I mean, I don't really feel comfortable scheduling a meeting then. Would you prefer to wait till our next council meeting?
I don't care. We were going to wait until we got through a couple of these to start to discuss what we wanted to do next anyhow. Now's a good time. Calendar up.
I heard a comment, just to throw out a comment from people about doing one on Monday or Tuesday, because many of the restaurants are closed Mondays and Tuesdays. You know, whether that's a point of consideration. It's a comment we put on our.
Tuesdays, we generally have a city council meeting for the first 2 weeks. Monday might be an interesting try. Do we have an open Monday?
And we're having, I thought we were going to have more of a discussion about the tax and where it was going to go and
Details for
whether or not we wanted to pass it now or wait until November to refer it. We're going to have some of that discussion before we had another meeting to talk about it.
I'm happy with that too. So I just don't want to, start steamrolling ahead without continually allowing for new public input.
Well, we do allow public comment prior to every meeting.
Yeah.
So we can get more there. I agree with Nancy that I think we've heard a lot. And the letters in particular, I think are helpful. Tonight's presentation was very well thought out, well presented. I appreciate that. I think we need, as a council, opportunity now to kind of put our thoughts together and schedule a follow-up meeting after we got a little more detail behind us. So you can always schedule the meeting further out, but I think we'd be better off to do that scheduling after we meet as a council once again on this subject. It gets hard to schedule. Everybody's calendars fill up.
Well, I mean, the month, my point kind of being is that the month is almost over at this point, and then we will have our first 2 meetings at least scheduled so far,
And there's 4th of July.
and the 4th of July and so on.
Well, maybe we should have a special council meeting sometime in the next couple of weeks and open it up to people who want to talk as well, like we usually do, so that we can kind of discuss some of these issues that have been brought up regarding the tax, and then have another public meeting to get some feedback on what we have discussed or have decided on. Because, we could have open meetings forever.
We could do it as a work session.
Yeah.
That we have our time, then the public comment would be already there. That would work.
Yeah.
I can't probably do it next Monday. That would be too quick, too much. But during the week, later in that week, the following week, we have our council meeting. The following week after that, we have a regular work session. So we have also opportunity there.
Well, we go 2 more weeks before we have a city council meeting.
Yeah, there's an extra week, so there's next
There is?
week.
Yeah,
And then we have the following week, which give you, if you were to schedule something the following week, you could have time to advertise it.
Okay, that'd work.
So that would be the week
Monday's the 28th.
of Monday the
Yeah.
28th.
That would work great.
I won't be available.
Any day that week, Bruce?
From the 25th to like the 3rd.
Oh, okay.
I'll be out of town.
All right.
No, we could still meet.
Sure.
We could do all kinds of things while you're gone.
Mark can do his, all of it, and we can do the rest of your presentation. That's not a problem. Or Karen could, or somebody from the staff could do it for you. Is that okay?
Well, no, I'm not worried about the presentation, but I would like to be here when we're talking about what's next.
True.
Can you zoom in?
Possibly. I'm not sure of everything yet, probably.
If we want to do it on a Monday, we can always do it the Monday before the next council meeting too.
I think that's what we're talking about, the 28th.
I was thinking like the 5th.
Yeah, that's observed
Yeah.
holiday.
Oh, you're right.
So I guess we could go back to the week of the 21st through the 25th.
Yeah.
We haven't discussed
Oh,
that.
yeah, the 25th I'm leaving, but did
Yeah, but I mean,
that?
the Monday, we do have the whole, at least Monday through Thursday then.
I probably won't be here on that Monday.
Okay,
Just basically 24 hours. It just depends on you want to get advertisement out for people to get public comment.
How about the 22nd? That's a Tuesday. Is that all right for advertising? How much time do you need?
Well, you always want to give at least 24 hours notice minimum, but you want to make sure if you are looking for public input that we can get the word out that we added an extra meeting.
Well, most of it's going to be work session for us.
Okay.
I mean, but people will be allowed to talk, but it'd be mostly work session for us.
I would be with that person. I won't be here, but I can see if Kelsey can cover.
I'm not available on the 22nd.
How about the 23rd? Do I hear the 23rd?
23rd? Calling once? Calling twice?
So it's 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Okay.
23rd work session at 6 p.m.
And just so we can post it.
Agenda will be a work session for what we've heard and maybe hammer out some details so that we can have a more informed discussion going on.
And there will be public comment accepted at the
Yeah,
meeting.
it's a work session, so there'll be public comment.
Okay.
Can I do anything else for you as far as research? Do you want to hear more from anybody else?
What you've done, I think, has been very helpful.
You want more?
It can't hurt to.
Okay, because a lot of the restaurants don't open until Thursday. So I just want to be helpful to you in helping you facilitate your decision. So I'd be happy to do it. So,
Make one more pass at it and that pretty well cover it.
okay, so I'll call more Yahats, a few more Ashland.
Thanks, Deb.
Okay, that's it for good of the order. We are adjourned. Thank you.